So I'm going to deal next with Shrewsbury Hospital. Directors of the Haemophilia Centre there in the 70s and 80s, Dr. O'Shea and Dr. Rees. Shrewsbury too was part of the West Midlands area, and Dr. O'Shea or Dr. Rees regularly attended the meetings of the West Midlands Working Party on the Treatment of Haemophiliacs, the minutes of which we've looked at, from the 70s through to the early 90s. Shrewsbury became a designated associate centre in 1976, and in common with the other centres that we've been looking at this afternoon, it was supplied in terms of products and blood by the Regional Transfusion Centre in Birmingham. In terms of the numbers of patients treated, the figures from the returns from 1976 through to 85 give a range of between 7 and 12 patients with haemophilia A, up to 4 patients with haemophilia B, and up to 5 patients with von Willebrand's disease. If we turn, before we look at the returns, to one meeting of the Working Party on the Treatment of Haemophiliacs, SHIN 5036. These are the minutes of a meeting on the 19th of May 1980, and we can see that Dr. O'Shea was amongst the attendees. And if we go to the top of page 3, this is just in the context of a broader discussion about availability of different types of product. At the top of the page, it records Dr. O'Shea saying this: he wished to continue using cryoprecipitate at Shrewsbury, particularly while BPL factor 8 was not being produced, but he had been unable to obtain the requested amounts of cryoprecipitate from the BTS. He asked if the production of cryoprecipitate could be increased at the BTS while NHS factor 8 was unavailable to offset the increased charge on SALOP's budget. I'm afraid I don't know what that's a reference to, which would arise from the need to purchase more commercial factor 8. And then Dr. Bird, who was based at the Regional Transfusion Centre, indicated it wasn't possible to manufacture more cryo because plasma was needed to send to BPL, and then various other contributions set out, including the suggestion, end of the second paragraph, that reversion to using cryoprecipitate would be a retrograde step. But in any event, I show you that because it gives an indication of Dr. O'Shea's thinking, or at least his preferences. If we then turn to the annual returns, 1976, HCDO 5050_004, page 2, we can see 7 patients treated with haemophilia A that year, 2 with Christmas disease. And then we'll see that the sole products in use were cryoprecipitate and cryobulin, and that the vast majority of usage was of cryoprecipitate. Can I correct a figure in our written note in relation to this centre where an extra 0 had crept in, looking as though 930,000 units of cryoprecipitate were used for the treatment of 7 patients, which would have been a little unusual. But in any event, the dominant picture there, one of use of cryo, and you'll see no NHS concentrates in use, consistent perhaps with what we saw reflected in the minutes of that meeting. If we look at 1977, HCDO 301202, and we go to page 7, we can see a similar picture. The product predominantly used is cryoprecipitate, nearly 132,000, no NHS concentrate, and then smaller amounts of 3 types of commercial concentrate, factor 8, Co8, and cryobulin used. At 1979, HCDO 0001369, I should say we don't have the return for 1978, I think. So 1979 shows now the introduction of NHS concentrates, and that's the main product being used in this year, just over 156,000 units. The second in terms of volume is cryoprecipitate, but we can see that the amount of cryoprecipitate use has declined substantially. And then thirdly, commercial concentrates, factor 8 and cryobulin. If we go then to the annual return for 1980, HCDA 301467, what's interesting in particular here is, first of all, the usage of cryoprecipitate has increased, but secondly, we can see cryoprecipitate being used for home treatment, and it's the main product used for home treatment in 1980. Roughly or a little over double the next volume used, which was the Armour product, just under 45,000 units, and then NHS concentrate at 41,385 units used for home treatment. So a different picture from what we've seen elsewhere, with cryoprecipitate being used by this time, if at all, in hospitals rather than for home treatment. 1981 HCDO 301568 again shows continued use of cryoprecipitate for home treatment, albeit that now more NHS concentrates are used for home treatment than previously. And we can see Armour is also in use in the centre in that year. However, when we get to 1982, the position changes. HCDO 301666. We can see now in 1982, there's no cryoprecipitate used at all, except for the treatment of patient with von Willebrand's disease. The bulk of the treatment is with NHS concentrate, nearly 166,000 units, and then with Armour factor 8. So what accounts for that change, I'm afraid we simply are not in a position to assess. And then for 1983, HCDO 301762, similarly, no cryoprecipitate at all, predominant product use NHS concentrate, but also a significant amount of Armour product used for home treatment. And then finally, 1984, HCDO 301855. Again, no cryoprecipitate. The only products used are NHS concentrates and Armour, but the dominant product in use is the NHS concentrate. There is limited other information in relation to product usage or information provided to patients. You do have a statement, sir, from one witness who says that neither he nor his parents were ever given information about the risks posed by factor 8 concentrates at this centre. And likewise, another patient talking about the provision of treatment at Shrewsbury to their son could not recall any discussions about risks with them. Both Dr. O'Shea and Dr. Rees were members of UK HCDO, and one or other of them seemed to have attended a number of meetings in the late 70s, and then in 85. There isn't attendance at every meeting, but again, it's maybe reasonable to assume they would have received the minutes of those meetings that they did not attend. There's no contemporaneous documentation, I'm afraid, in relation to the process for testing patients, either for HTLV3 or for hepatitis C. You have a couple of witness accounts. One whose son was treated with blood products there gives a time frame in terms of testing for HIV in December 1984, and the test result being confirmed in March 1985. And not a suggestion there of testing taking place without consent. In terms of the figures infected with HIV, can we go back to INQY 40250, please? Page 2. The figure for Shrewsbury appears towards the bottom of the page. It's centre 23. And what that appears to identify is 1 patient in 1984 and 6 in 1985, giving a total of 7 patients testing positive with HIV, which is a very high proportion of the numbers of patients regularly treated. But we can't cast any light on why that might be the case, or indeed know with any degree of confidence whether that's correct. We don't, I'm afraid, have information regarding numbers of patients infected with hepatitis C. So can I then turn to Hereford? The centre director at Hereford was Dr. Kramer during the period with which we're concerned. Dr. Kramer was also a member of the West Midlands Regional Health Authority Working Party on the Treatment of Haemophiliacs. The Hereford Centre was recognised as a designated associate centre in the course of 1976, and it too was supplied with its products by the Birmingham Regional Transfusion Centre. It treated a small number of patients. The figures on the returns from 76 through to 85 give a range of between 1 and 4 patients with haemophilia A, up to 2 patients with haemophilia B, and up to 2 patients with von Willebrand's disease. The only information we really have is from the annual returns, and I can take those fairly quickly because they show a fairly consistent picture, or straightforward picture, I should say. So for 1977, to treat 3 haemophilia A patients, the centre used cryoprecipitate only. In 1978, to treat 3 haemophilia A patients, the centre used cryoprecipitate and NHS factor 8, approximately double the amount of, the NHS was approximately double the amount of cryoprecipitate used, but no commercial. In 1979, to treat 2 patients, there was no cryoprecipitate used. The only treatment was with NHS factor concentrate. If we then go to the return for 1980, which is HCDO 301427, we can see 3 patients treated in that year. The figures are slightly indistinct, but you'll see no cryoprecipitate, and then for the first time, commercial concentrate used, Armour 7,750 units, but the main treatment for the purposes of home treatment was with NHS concentrates. And so can I correct again, our written note refers to the figure of 27,350 units as being units of cryoprecipitate when it should have been NHS concentrate. But in any event, that's the first use of commercial concentrate. In 1981, the precise figures are difficult to discern, but it's just NHS concentrate. Likewise, in 1982, it's only NHS concentrate, and the same in 1983 and in 1984. Dr. Kramer does not appear to have been an attender at UK HCDO meetings. Again, however, he was the director of a designated associate centre, so would presumably have received copies of minutes. He did participate in and was a member of the Regional Working Party on the Treatment of Haemophiliacs. We don't have any information regarding arrangements for testing or provision of information about diagnosis or treatment. What we can say is the UK HCDO data indicates that no patients were infected with HIV at the Hereford Centre. Finally, for today, Worcester. So the director at the Worcester Centre from 1976 and during the 1980s was Dr. Payne. Worcester also, in common with all the other centres that we've been looking at this afternoon, was part of the West Midlands Regional Health Authority. Dr. Payne was a regular attender of the meetings of the Working Party on the treatment of haemophiliacs within the West Midlands region through the 1970s and 1980s. Worcester was designated as an associate haemophilia centre in the course of 1976, and again our understanding is it was supplied by the Regional Transfusion Centre in Birmingham. It was a small centre, not quite as small as Hereford, but small. Haemophilia A patients 3 to 7 treated annually in the period from 1976 to 85. No more than one haemophilia B patient recorded in the annual returns, and up to 3 patients with von Willebrand's disease. If we turn to the annual returns, which I'm afraid again are our only real source of information, 1976 HCDO 5026_004 we'll see that the main treatment used was cryoprecipitate with a small amount of ARMA factor 8 in use. For 1977, HCDO 301221, page 4, we see, again, still no NHS concentrate, so it's cryo and ARMA product only. But now the ARMA product is the product most in use, 26,787 units, contrasting with 7,680 units of cryoprecipitate. We don't have a return for 1978, so we pick the picture up in 1979, HCDO 301385, which shows a similar broad picture, no NHS concentrate, small amount of cryoprecipitate treatment, predominantly with the ARMA product, 36,135 units. If we can then go to the return for 1980, HCDO 301484, the comparatively unusual feature of this return is that the sole treatment is with commercial concentrate, with ARMA, both hospital and home, so no NHS treatment at all, concentrate or cryoprecipitate for patients with haemophilia A, albeit that plasma and cryo was used for the treatment of a patient with von Willebrand's disease. 1981 sees a reversal of the picture, HCDO 301587, this is the first appearance on a return of NHS concentrates. I'm afraid the figures are not easy to read, and even fainter are the figures in relation to ARMA. So I'm not even going to attempt to try and work out what those are. I just don't think it's possible to do so. But we do see NHS concentrate used for the first time. 1982 is HCDO 301683. Happily, the figures here are clear. The product mostly used, NHS concentrate now, no cryoprecipitate at all, but also ARMA factor 8. Although the ARMA is used only for hospital treatment and not in fact for home treatment at all. And then 1983, HCDO 301779. Again, we see a picture of there being only NHS concentrates and the ARMA concentrate in use. Predominantly NHS concentrates, a relatively small but by no means insignificant amount of ARMA product. Cryoprecipitate only used for the treatment of patients with von Willebrand's. And then 1984, HCDO 301872, we see a different picture from the preceding years. No commercial concentrate used. The main treatment is with NHS concentrates and a small amount of cryoprecipitate now used again for the treatment of haemophilia A patients. Again, we don't, I'm afraid, have any understanding as to why that might be the case and whether that was a conscious response or merely a reflection of what was available, or whether there was some other reason. We have nothing by way of direct knowledge or direct information about Dr. Payne's understanding of the knowledge of the risks of hepatitis or HIV. He does not appear to have been an attender at UK HCDO meetings. He did, however, attend regularly the West Midlands Working Party meetings, and so would have gleaned information from that in addition to the minutes of UK HCDO meetings. We don't, I'm afraid, have any information about the process of testing and treatment from the documentation, whether for hepatitis or HIV, nor, I'm afraid, do we have any data about the numbers infected, either in relation to HIV or in relation to hepatitis. So that completes the picture for Worcester and completes the presentations for this week.
Yes, well, thank you very much. So that brings to a conclusion the review of the smaller haemophilia centres. We have to return, have we not, to look at pharma, the pharmaceutical companies and their knowledge and response to risk, which we do, I think, on the 2nd of November. Am I right?
Yes. I'm just checking my note. So I should just say, in relation to the small haemophilia centres, there are obviously some haemophilia centres we've not yet covered, but as I think I indicated at the beginning of the week, which now seems a very long time ago, those will be covered by way of written notes, and probably not unless something new emerges from them by way of oral presentation. And the plan is, in relation to all the notes on haemophilia centres, which they're currently available to core participants and their recognised legal representatives, but the plan is to ensure that those are published on the Inquirer's website over the coming weeks so that they can be read by those who are not core participants or who don't have access to the Inquirer's document management systems.
Very well. So there's a break of that case until the 2nd of November when we start again at 10 o'clock.
Thank you.